So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be preaching on the Isaiah text today. The Matthew text is a good one, very interesting. A lot of folks think it has to do with the rapture. And the only thing I'll say about the gospel today is that it does not, okay, in my opinion. So we can, talk about that more later, but it does not. So it can be taken the wrong way. So I don't mean to leave you hanging there, but I'm going to preach on the Isaiah text today. Again, my name's Pastor Kristin. I came over from Fort Worth, the Great Divide, but it's a pleasure to be with you here in Dallas. If you ever get the chance to come to the pub church, please come. It's on Sunday evenings, which gives me the opportunity to preach here this morning. Again, Advent, it means coming. It's a Latin word, adventus, and it has an active sense to it, a meaning both for our present and for our future. Christ has come, and Christ will come. A little bit of a tricky concept, but it's true. Advent reminds us of God's vision manifested both now and, of course, not yet. As I mentioned, we still know that there's so much conflict in the world, and there's more that needs to happen for that vision that God has given us to be fulfilled. When we think about this vision for the world, our Hebrew Bible reading today from Isaiah gives us a brilliant taste. Swords into plowshares, spears into pruning hooks, walking in the light of the Lord. It all sounds a little dreamy, a little pie in the sky, especially in light of the news that we hear about on a daily basis. There's these phrases that have been popping up in my mind about peace that don't seem to jive with the peace we hear about in the gospel. Peace through strength, for instance, or show of force, are phrases I never thought I'd be hearing so regularly, and yet here we are. Now, I'm positive there are folks out there who hear Isaiah 2:4 and they think, how lovely and how naive. I've gotten that feedback in sermons that I've given when I've criticized certain types of force that our government has used. People tell me it's more complicated than that, Pastor Kristin. I imagine folks in the military and otherwise, and I can take that feedback, I understand. But it comes back to that idea of, yes, we would love for it to be peaceful and beautiful where we don't need weapons, but that's naive. Well, would you believe that it sounded just as unlikely and naive to those who heard it in the time of Isaiah? The prosperous time of Israel and Judea in the early 8th century BCE are long gone by this point when this is written. The first part of Isaiah is written in the context of relentless advances by the Assyrian Empire, who have destroyed the nation of Israel and are proceeding to attack even those places where the refugees have fled. So the refugees have gone to the places where they thought were safe, and now even those are being pursued. This amounts to a backdrop to the reading we read today of great suffering, anxiety, and imminent imperial conquest. Indeed, swords to plowshares felt as unlikely or naive then as it does perhaps now, maybe more so. But regardless of its perceived naivete, the swords into plowshares image has been such a powerful picture of hope throughout history. It's been borrowed in landmark speeches by Dwight Eisenhower, Ronald Reagan, and Jimmy Carter, to name a few. Richard Nixon even took his presidential oath of office with the Bible open to this verse, that exact page of Isaiah. So with that said, has the world become more peaceful? Or were those just empty sentiments? And I suppose it depends who you ask. But regardless, I will argue at least one thing, that while the vision of God's kingdom obviously has not fully come to pass, The image is not as pie in the sky as it seems. I participated, you may think this is silly, but I did, in a Guns to Gardens program sponsored by Presbyterians for Peace, where folks can safely donate weapons that are dismantled and turned into garden tools on the spot by local blacksmiths. This happened in Fort Worth just about 2 months ago. Is there anything more biblically literal than that? I don't think so. I love it. And has anyone heard of the Megatons to Megawatts program? This one's very interesting. It may seem a little more obscure, but it was indeed a modern version of Swords to Plowshares. It was a real governmental program where the United States purchased highly enriched bomb-grade uranium from Russia, left over from Soviet warheads, to be turned into basic utility energy for the American people. President George H.W. Bush announced it, President Clinton signed the agreement, and the 20-year project was completed in 2013 under President Obama. Even more intriguing is that this particular idea began with a single New York Times opinion piece written by an MIT scientist named Thomas L. Neff. It began with one person who had a creative idea, some spark of faith that this idea might work. And what if he had said to himself, this is a waste of time, or no one will care, this can't possibly happen, this will never catch on. But he dared to dream. And can you even dare to imagine turning our Air Force fighter jets into tractor parts for my in-laws in Oklahoma? Our guns into modern art or garden tools? Can you dare to imagine a world of such peace and trust that we wouldn't need such things? What would that world look like? Can we even imagine it as a first step? And what step could you take? And again, I know what some of y'all might be thinking. Actual guns into actual garden tools, that's some liberal hippie stuff. This is Texas, after all. I'm a native Texan, so is my dad. To that I say, you may be right. Maybe it's some hippie stuff. But that is the image that God has given us to work with today. And I'm not asking you to be naive, but just imagine that even in the midst of great uncertainty, we could trust our neighbors enough to put our guard down, to turn our weapons into hammers and screws. If only we could be so trusting, so at peace, and so without fear, if we could even just imagine it as a first step. Who is going to make that first step and that first move? And I would argue that Jesus asked it to be you and to be us. It is an uncomfortable and a scary thought, but remember what's on the other side, walking in the light of the Lord. I'll give you one anecdote. I was the infrastructure chair of my neighborhood association board over the past 2 years. Pat on the back to me for that. The group is called the Fairmont Neighborhood Association. And I recently met with Joe, the incoming president, to debrief my time on the board and pass along any unfinished projects. And bless this man, he took his duties very seriously. And to prepare to be president, and to be in this completely unpaid volunteer role, he had gone back through our electronic documents to read all the meeting minutes from the FNA going back to its founding in the 1990s. Okay, I know, this guy, I love him. And he lamented that participation in the association had diminished considerably since the 90s, a trend that began well before COVID-19. And he had a theory as to why, and it had to do with crime. The crime rate in our neighborhood was considerably higher in the 90s and 2000s, and this kind of anchored and galvanized participation in the neighborhood association. In those days, a much larger portion of these meeting minutes, which he read through, and activities were devoted to crime prevention. Indeed, the majority of the time was devoted to crime prevention. Everyone had a vested stake in organizing to protect themselves and their little sliver of this place that we love, Fairmont. Now, here's the thing. I believe with all my heart that fear is not the only way to motivate a community to come together, but it probably is the fastest way and the easiest way, and it awakens this animalistic need to protect our own. This is, of course, a universal need as well, to be safe, to be protected. It brings people together. And during my meeting with Joe, I'm sorry to say, a nefarious thought crossed through my mind. There's a way to get more members, stoke fear, and play up crime statistics. We wouldn't have to lie, only quote percentages and numbers that our average resident would not be able to put into context at all. Then we would propose a solution to this perceived threat that we just made up. Our neighborhood's really not that dangerous. Another thought flashed into my mind. Surely some pastors do this, either meaning to or not. Politicians, businesses, social media algorithms, and advertisers certainly do this. They leverage fear because it's simply the quickest and most effective way to get folks to care, to participate, to spend money, to vote, or whatever it is that you want them to do. Of course, Joe and I would never do this. We'll work with what we've got and build momentum the scrappy way because it's the right way. It will not be easy or fast or glamorous. It definitely will not make us rich or famous, not even Fort Worth famous, not even Fairmont famous. But our churches are called to do the same. Our goal is not fame and fortune. Our goal is to do the right thing, even if it means telling people, you have nothing to fear. If that means we are more scrappy, then so be it. Welcome to Advent, the holidays, the holy days. And in this time, I'm choosing to dream about this radical peace. In Isaiah 2, God has gifted us with a vision for us to start with, a vision for true peace, one that we would do well to read and meditate on again and again. Perhaps it will inspire you to do something like Presbyterians for Peace, or like Thomas L. Neff, maybe something on a smaller scale. Or perhaps it will usher in an inner peace that you have been seeking. Advent presents this incredible opportunity for us to be countercultural. When much of our culture, like I talked about with the kids, is celebrating a Christmas that Jesus Christ himself would scratch his head about, there is a wonderfully subversive opportunity to be different and to bring this vision of peace into a world as a stark contrast to the cultural phenomenon that has become known as the Christmas season. It's not about slapping a Keep Christ in Christmas bumper sticker on your car, although that's okay if you want to do that. But it's about practicing extraordinary generosity, extraordinary kindness, extraordinary peace and gentleness, and reflecting on this beautiful message from Isaiah, pie in the sky though it may seem. You can still make a choice to live without fear, to love and trust your neighbors, even if it bites you in the backside every now and then. This peace and trust must start with someone. It must start somewhere. And for Christians, it starts with God in Christ, making the first move into this scrappy, hurting world, bringing no weapons, stoking no fear, believing that true peace is possible if someone takes that first step. Advent starts with Christ, it continues with you, and I ask, will you take a step? Amen.